Hey everybody, I'm Christopher Green. You're watching Alternative Media Television Live. It is, of course, June 28, 2013, and breaking news. The mainstream media still thinks that George Zimmerman is white. Let me show you a picture here. You can check it out on our Facebook page. We've been putting a lot of posts. It's a great place to check us out if you're not already in the Facebook room. I encourage you to do so. We got a lot of content there. We don't post on the main website, amtvmedia.com. We've got a thriving community. Make sure to like us. Let me go ahead and show you this picture here because the mainstream media, like I said, still thinks this guy's white. Let's go here to the full screen. Got a nice picture of the Zimmerman, Mr. Zimmerman, that, President Barack Obama in the mainstream media really likes to pitch that this guy had a vendetta against black people. His whole goal was to attack the black man, especially with Skittles. Because a Skittle-carrying, iced tea-carrying, hoodie-wearing kid like Trayvon was the target for George Zimmerman. And he's been convicted, of course. George Zimmerman has been absolutely and totally convicted before the trial had even started. President Barack Obama identifying with Trayvon, really not giving us any of the details or behind-the-scenes information on, Trayvon himself, his character, etc. So you can see here, please share this. So seriously, they still think I'm white. They still think I'm white. And this is how it's being portrayed, very, very much as a divisive issue, to create tensions here in America. So the mainstream media is going to use this as much as possible, again, to create a smokescreen, to take your eye off the ball from what really matters. Also, it's a scorcher here in Phoenix today. In fact, the major headlines I was reading even earlier this morning, I'll show you, shows a picture here of Phoenix freak heat. Phoenix set for 119 degrees. Pretty incredible. I'm bringing up the weather report. So it's actually feels like about 104, they say. It's 110 degrees right now, and we will be inching up to 120, depending on where you are in the valley. So if you're watching this live stream and I just engulf in a ball of flames live on camera, make sure to give someone a call because that's not supposed to happen live on air. I want to welcome everybody to the live chat. Really been enjoying doing these the past few days. We're eagerly getting set up in studio, trying our best on a budget with what we can to build out the new set, which is kind of in motion now. We're trying to figure out how to make that possible, how to work that into the program here so we can continue to bring the real truth in the real media, which, I was talking earlier with Topher Morrison. I was talking about the fact, I hate how the truth in media, this truth in media, everybody's a truther now. It's like Vogue. Before you were a conspiracy theorist, you were a nutbag. People laughed at you. People laughed at me like, hey, he's starting a YouTube channel. What a joke. Now you've got every bigwig across America, every corporate type moving in and doing their best to co-opt the movement you started. The movement that you helped propel from nothing. And for those of you that have tuned in for the past 3.5 years, know that I started broadcasting literally out of a basement. Some of the original videos I almost kind of laugh at now. I had, pets, walking by me, and, we had like a, $40 camera on my face, and literally from nothing. So, pretty amazing what we've accomplished. And as I always say, give yourself a pat on the back because it's what you've done in terms of sharing our content, getting it out to more people, sharing it via Facebook, liking our videos, following me on Twitter, and just getting the word out of truth on all the breaking content that we've put out over the years. I mean, honestly, we were cutting edge when we did pieces on people like Andrew Breitbart and the conspiracy around his death. I believe, and I've been on record many times, I believe he was killed. I believe he was absolutely whacked by the establishment, just like Michael Hastings. People said I was crazy back then. Now more and more people, even the mainstream media, is covering this stuff because, of course, they're co-opting your movement that you started as well. You see, now they see it as big business, so they want to get involved. So the CNNs and the Foxes and, you know, the Bloomberg, these multi-billion-dollar companies, you know, they're moving their big asses into the scene now. You know, trying to push independent media companies, organizations like AMTV around. You know, honestly, if they had it their way, we wouldn't even be here. So this is a full frontal attack on the real news and what is legitimately truly independent on every single level. And it will continue to be that way as long as I'm here and as long as I have the ability to bring the news to our loyal audience. So in addition to extreme heat, in addition to 120-degree weather, we have the Trayvon Martin, George Zimmerman case being blasted all over the media. And again, the mainstream media got this stuff wrong from the very beginning. You've seen the photos. George Zimmerman, he's got a bloody face. Eyewitness accounts by one of the neighbors says Trayvon Martin was straddling George Zimmerman, literally banging his head against concrete. The victim. I mean, that's how the mainstream media positioned it. You know, victim Trayvon Martin, Skittle-carrying, iced tea drinking victim, was literally banging George Zimmerman's head on the concrete. Sounds like a nice kid, doesn't he? Doesn't that sound just so nice? You know, just kind of just a regular day in the neighborhood. You know, just going to bang somebody's skull, you know, on the concrete. And of course, this case, and it is a tragedy, and I don't want to take from that. It's very multi-layered. There's things, in my opinion, based on what we've, you know, the evidence or what has been accused so far, what we know from the 911 calls. There's definitely certain areas of responsibility that George Zimmerman, I think, should have to face. And if, you know, proven in a court of law to be the case, should, you know, have to face the consequences of. Number one, and one of the biggest issues was the fact that, you know, he went after Trayvon in the first place, which appears that they have record. He's on the phone with 911 making comments, and then he takes it upon himself to approach and pursue Trayvon. So, you know, that in and of itself, not really a smart move, shows my opinion, very poor judgment by George. But the other part of the story, again, this coming from eyewitness accounts, does not paint Trayvon in the perfect picture of victim. Again, a kid who's a burglar, expelled from school on multiple occasions, stealing people's jewelry, watches. He's got pictures of himself on Facebook holding a gat. You know, doesn't seem like the clean-cut, you know, cookie-cutter kid that the mainstream media wants to make him out to be. That doesn't mean he was a demon. That doesn't mean that he didn't, you know, suffer a tragedy. It doesn't even necessarily mean that what George Zimmerman did wasn't wrong. But let's let the courts decide, you know, because Americans just want to convict people nowadays. Same thing with Christopher Dorner, which I covered incessantly, never gets a trial, gets lit up, gasoline poured all over the house. They just murder him in plain sight. I mean, it's basically like a repeat of Waco. The LAPD opening fire on innocent victims in the streets of Los Angeles, wounded a 70-year-old plus old woman and her daughter driving a pickup truck, not even matching the color of the suspect's vehicle. There was another Caucasian gentleman rammed by cops, shot at as well. So again, there was no due process. Nobody seemed to give a shit about giving, you know, Christopher Dorner a fair trial. Certainly, it appears to be the case with Trayvon Martin and George Zimmerman as the accused and as the defendant. His parents aren't allowed inside the courtroom. So a lot of trials, a lot of interesting cases in the news, and I'm going to get into the Hernandez case, which is developing here in a moment, and I covered the other day. But first I want to read this to you. George Zimmerman trial. Neighbor testifies Trayvon Martin was straddling Zimmerman moments before fatal gunshot. Let's go to the screen share. I want you to see this. Here we go. This is from CBSNews.com. A former neighbor of George Zimmerman testified he saw two men in a tussle outside his home the night of February 26, 2012, and said he now believes the person on top in the altercation, which would moments later turn fatal, was Trayvon Martin. So I want you to think about somebody on top of somebody else. Does that paint a picture of victim to you, or does that paint a picture of attacker? Again, Trayvon Martin, according to this eyewitness, was on top of George Zimmerman. Does that look like a kid that was trying to run away or maybe get out of a bad situation? Or does that look like somebody who's aggressively attacking somebody else? In key testimony, he also said he believes George Zimmerman was the person yelling for help. So according to eyewitness account, George Zimmerman, who again has been completely character assassinated in the news, and positioned as a KKK member of some sort, was actually crying for help like a girl, basically, because his head was getting banged into the concrete. Continues, John Good, this is the eyewitness, took the stand Friday in the 5th day of testimony in the Zimmerman second-degree murder trial. The former Neighborhood Watch captain is charged with shooting the unarmed teen as he was walking back to his father's fiance's home through a Sanford, Florida, gated community. Wonder what Jesse Jackson is saying about this right now. He's probably leading some kind of march in the streets, creating kind of that black versus white, tension, kind of blow it out of proportion, increase, his own selfish public image. John Good testified he saw a man in dark clothing on top of a man who was wearing a red or light-colored clothing with lighter skin. Zimmerman, 29 years old, was wearing a red jacket the night of the altercation, and Martin was wearing a dark hoodie. However, it says Good testified that he did not see the person on top. Okay, so this is where there's been multiple and different eyewitness accounts. Good, this specific eyewitness, says he did not see the person on top smashing the other person's head into the sidewalk. There's been other accounts saying that that was the case. Taking the stand Friday, John Good said he was at home watching television with his wife when he heard a faint noise that seemed to be getting closer. Outside, he said he saw the person on top of another man. The man on the bottom, who he said he now believes is George Zimmerman, yelled for help. At first, it was, quote, "What's going on?" And no one answered, Good said, describing calling out to the men. And then at that point, the person on the bottom, I could finally see. I heard a cry and a plea for help. George Zimmerman. And we've got this picture out today on the Facebook page. Give you another nice sexy screenshot of George here. Seriously? They still think I'm white? Looking at some of the comments here, Kimberly Gibson says, and the world still thinks Obama is black. It's got 5 up rates on the Facebook page. Tassimo Bud says, only in 21st century America do white people get victimized from racism. Pretty interesting comment. So dealing with extreme heat, dealing with the George Zimmerman, Trayvon Martin trial, of which we will keep you updated, had a few awesome videos dropped yesterday. Make sure to watch. If you haven't already, please share with your friends and family. And again, to remind you, you can check all of our content on our main website, amtvmedia.com. So that's the best place to find everything we do, in addition to our YouTube channel and our social media network through Facebook and Twitter. Put a lot of content up here day to day, and we've got a thriving community. So if you haven't already, make sure to log in, sign up. If you don't already have an account, we have a newsletter that I'm working on that I'll have coming out on a regular basis, giving you literally up-to-date, up-to-the-minute, latest breaking reports. We had a report by Topher Morrison yesterday, came out yesterday evening, was Ted Kaczynski right about the NSA. Very interesting in the fact that a guy that a lot of people perceive to be kind of the crackpot, insane asylum, maybe he was on, some kind of drugs, living out in the woods. It was actually, in actuality, pretty darn correct about what's happening in terms of the surveillance state today. The wiretapping scandals of the Obama administration targeting hundreds and hundreds of journalists at the Associated Press. I mean, take a look at Greenwald, for example, who's been personally attacked for his coverage of Edward Snowden. People saying that he should somehow have to face the consequences of just getting out journalism to the American people. So pretty incredible. Also personally put out a report yesterday, DOMA, the Defense of Marriage Act, Hillary Clinton and the Clintons in general stimulate gays for votes. of course, Hillary Clinton very much looking to win in 2016, which I think she has a very good chance of doing if the country actually still exists in 2016, if we just don't disintegrate into a ball of flames. Maybe the 120-degree heat here in Arizona might just take us all over at once. It's kind of like, living in hell at times with the heat. And of course, Washington, D.C. Very much has an eye of the mainstream media, the alternative media, in focus with this latest scandal, which the American people really don't seem to care about. That is honestly what is so incredible to me. Don't really seem to care that they're being watched. A good portion of America more consumed with TMZ, the latest name that's been dropped for Kim Kardashian's new baby, Northwest, I guess is the name, kind of like a direction of, I don't why they decided on that. But that is really what is consuming the American psyche on a day-to-day basis. And, of course, the drama of racially tense dramas and trials, like the George Zimmerman case itself. We've also had multiple updates over the past few days on the Aaron Hernandez case, which I actually have a video in post-production. Got a little music in my ear. Let me turn that off. It says, third man arrested in case involving ex-NFL player. And again, this kind of reminds me, harkens back to the O.J. Simpson trial. People just have a lot of trouble identifying with the fact that their hero, that the common gladiator on the field could be a creep, could be an utter insane person, could be a psychopath involved in these kinds of things. We hold these people up on a pedestal, just like we hold Hollywood up on a pedestal. We have a tendency to hold professional athletes up on a pedestal. A man arrested in Connecticut in connection with the murder case against former New England Patriots tight end Aaron Hernandez was being sent to Massachusetts on Friday, and investigators said a third suspect was arrested in South Florida. Massachusetts State Police said local officers in Miramar, Florida, captured Ernest Wallace early Friday afternoon, hours after a Connecticut judge ordered Carlos Ortiz turned over to Massachusetts authorities. New Britain State's attorney said investigators arrested the 27-year-old Ortiz in Bristol on Wednesday as part of the inquiry into the slaying of Boston semi-pro football player Odin Lloyd. Hernandez is charged with murder and the slaying of Lloyd near Hernandez's home in North Attleboro, Massachusetts. He's pleaded not guilty and is being held without bail. Ortiz was charged in Connecticut as a fugitive from justice. His public defender, Alfonso Sirica, declined to comment about the case. So what started as a single homicide, possibly premeditated, Aaron Hernandez allegedly at a club, caught on surveillance camera. I find it really interesting how, and it shows you his own surveillance footage at his home is actually what is being used to incriminate him. So he very well is probably guilty. Again, I don't want to convict him without there actually being a court hearing and the evidence being presented. We got to remember that it's innocent until proven guilty in this country, or at least it used to be. I guess it is kind of the other way around now, or you're just flat out guilty. But it was his own surveillance footage that had images of him with a gun, etc., being used to incriminate him. And it just goes to show you, you think that they're not going to use this technology, that the NSA, the FBI, the CIA is not going to craft any kind of narrative that they damn well please. I mean, if they want to ruin you, let's say they wanted to target you watching, target me, target anybody else, they wanted to ruin your life, they could pretty much just craft and create any narrative that they wanted to paint the picture of guilt. And that is pretty incredible to think about. It's pretty incredible to think of the power that these people have. And that's the question that Americans and people around the world, we really need to grapple with, because as much of a benefit as the technological revolution has been, we need to constantly ask, well, number one, who's responsible for this technology? And more importantly, who's in control of it? I talk a lot about the fact that Google, although it's this amazing company, this amazing invention, it has created this decentralized movement around content, media. Anybody can pick up a camera, get their blog content out to the world. I mean, just take a look at AMTV, for example, but is also very much a monopoly. And let me give you an example, because I've had a few comments saying, well, Google isn't a monopoly, Chris. You're getting your facts wrong. Well, they are definitely a monopoly in terms of video. In fact, Google owns YouTube, and YouTube controls over 80%. That's right, 80% of all video traffic on the web today. So if that's not a monopoly, I don't know what a monopoly is. So we very much have this hive mentality where the hive is all over YouTube, it is all over Google, companies like Facebook, Twitter, very much interconnected with government entities. It's the reason President Barack Obama is constantly meeting with people like Mark Zuckerberg. And I talk about this a lot of the time, a lot actually, is no matter how good intentioned a company may be, and I think a lot of the Silicon Valley billionaires that have created these companies from nothing and bootstrapped themselves into these, amazing platforms, I think a lot of these people are very well and good intentioned people. Some of these people have libertarian perspectives and are helping to fund amazing projects like the Seasteading Institute and things that are really just brightening the world, in my opinion, funding things like space exploration and looking at ways to clean, basic necessities around the world too, to clean water in underdeveloped countries. A good portion of the world doesn't have clean water. There's, malnourishment here in America and, around the world. I always joke with friends and family that now, post, 2008 collapse, although we're still living in this funny money haze, we're all still on heroin, but worse, drugged out. We're just shooting the shot glass of Jack Daniels, taking the hit of heroin, tying ourselves off. Ben Bernanke just, got that big pile of cocaine that everybody's just, driving up their nostrils. Now we're just bleeding from our faces right now and, just kind of giving the thumbs up. The hedge funds, the massive hedge funds on Wall Street, just funneling all this cheap credit at 15 times leverage. Let's say they're $1 billion invested in the market. They're actually operating on $15 billion in purchasing power. I mean, this is literally how the market system works. People don't understand this. They don't understand a multi-quadrillion dollar market, which is the derivatives market today, how absolutely fragile it is, how synthetic securities are actually literally securities created out of thin air. I used to track these instruments when I was in the quote-unquote investment world as a broker. I mean, these are the kinds of things happening behind the scenes that really the average Joe, the average John and Jane has very little understanding of. And that's why, in a lot of respects, I am so optimistic, America. There's so many great companies, innovators, entrepreneurs, hard workers. I don't care if you're the small business who paints homes for a living, or you're this, massive technology innovator like the PayPal founder Peter Thiel. There's so much energy and creativity. That's one of the things that has made America so great. It's why this social experiment has been such a fantastic one, or at least it had been up until this given point of time. But what people don't realize is we have such a structural problem at the very core of the system itself. That's the root of the problem that nobody's addressing. Nobody's looking at, okay, how do we restructure the financial markets? How do we de-lever out of a system that is levered, 20 to 1 or, 30 to 1 or maybe 100 to 1? And we've only become more leveraged over the past years through quantitative easing, 1, 2, 3, Operation Twist, billions and billions of dollars monthly on a monthly basis of mortgage-backed securities. We are more levered. The artificial suppression of interest rates, everything that's tied to mortgages or consumer credit card debt. All of these things directly influence the long-term survivability and sustainability of America and of an America that I love. And that many of you love. So, it really needs to happen. And I would really like to encourage, all of you tuning in And really, and I'm actively encouraging all kinds of people to come together. It's almost as if we need a really bright group and a think tank of some of the most brilliant minds in the world. Everybody from the technological innovators, the Silicon Valley heavy hitters to the average man. I mean, for example, there's another YouTuber called Drinking with Bob. His name's Bob. You should check him out. He does these, very aggressive rants. I usually get a pretty good kick out of him. He is running for political office. He just announced this the other day. And his whole assessment is like, look, wouldn't it be great just to get a regular person in office for a change? And as far as I know, I don't know him personally, but he's got a libertarian perspective. He's very critical of what's happening at government. He's got a no-nonsense approach on, here are some things that he says he's going to present in the not-too-distant future on, how we can fix things. Why not elect somebody like that? Why not have a Drinking with Bob? I know that's kind of a funny username. Why not have a regular Joe in office, clean things? I think it's fantastic. I mean, you don't have to be a genius. You do not have to be a multi-billionaire to help change things here in America. So we need this think tank. We need the brightest minds and those with just good instincts and, regular Joes and Johns and Janes to get together and put together an action plan, which I would like to even start looking at more aggressively this year, even as we close out the end of the year. I mean, how do we fix these core structural problems? Those are the things that personally keep me up at night. People ask, hey, Christopher, what are you worried about? I am most worried about the core structural problems that we have here in the United States when we look at things like the financial markets, when we look at things like an ever-expanding federal government that has concentrated powers at the highest level in law of the land, which has created a very specific distinction and a different set of rules for those at the very top. That was one thing that, honestly, Occupy Wall Street got right. It really, truly is the top, although I would argue 0.001%, not 1%. It's more like 0.001%. There's a very big distinction between their set of rules, their reality, what they live by, how they're rewarded, how they're treated and within the system itself, how they get special handouts, special bailouts, special treatment. They get let off the hook. People like John Corzine when they do things that are overtly wrong. People like Jamie Dimon, etc., versus the regular guy who, say we see this all the time, who maybe walks into a liquor store and steals a Twinkie and an iced tea, and he gets 3 strikes and goes to prison for the rest of his life. Is that the kind of society you want to live in, where honestly we've got these super powerful people that run the entire program? And what's amazing about it is there's no need for it anymore. There is honestly no justifiable need for that kind of concentration of power anymore. We have an environment in a world that has now been completely deconstructed by the internet and by technology itself, which has created tons of opportunity. It, of course, has changed the economy. People ask me a lot. I'll get a lot of young kids. They say, hey, Christopher, I'm in high school. I love your show. Or I'm in college. What should I be studying? How should I position myself so that I'll be employable? And when I look at that, and these are really legitimate, great questions, and I'm honored that people will ask me for that kind of advice, I think you should be thinking a lot differently and a lot more different than how are you going to be employable. You should think more along the lines how you're going to create value for yourself. Create demand for yourself. Don't think of it the other way around. This is not the world. This is not the 1950s nuclear household anymore, where the wife stays home with the kids. She's able to, be a great mom, and people always give that such shit, or they'll, maybe even accuse me of being sexist or something when I say that. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. She was fantastic. In fact, she's my hero. I wouldn't be the person I am today without her. She took care of everything. She worked just as hard as my father, who was, a very hardworking, blue-collar guy who owned his own business, and they were a team. They did a fantastic job, but that's not the world we live in anymore. We live in a world where the feminist movement, and I believe in equality on every level, but it's created an environment, a for-profit environment. I want you to remember that. People think, oh, these equal rights are so great. It's a for-profit environment where they've now taken the female out of the household. It doesn't matter if it was female or male. Put two people in the workforce. It's expanded the money supply, and it's created bigger profits for, guess who? The large corporations that dominate the world. Whether or not we're looking at the food industry and companies like Monsanto, or we're looking at the financial services industry. In all the products and services that we are sold every single day, the billions of dollars put into marketing campaigns and advertising programs to indoctrinate our children and our youth at a very early age, before even their synapses are properly firing, to create a fabricated world and a fabricated environment for them. I look at friends, some of which that have just had children, and I watch their 1-year-old. I watch their toddler mesmerized by the TV, can't take their eyes off. It's one of the only things that actually calms them down. And, parents have a tendency, you got a kid, he's got a lot of energy. It's like, so the kid watches TV, it's like, oh, thank God. He shut up for a few minutes. He's actually, consumed by something. Do you even realize what's being programmed into your child's mind? Every commercial that indoctrination at such an early age. It is unbelievable. People ask questions like, how was Adolf Hitler able to rise to power? Some of it was timing. He got involved in a time when honestly, economically, Germany was in ruins, much like 2008. There was a lot of angst. He was able to, kind of craft his position and rise to power. And then he very healthily, although in a very dogmatic way, was able to kind of craft a public image of himself, create a lot of, I'm trying to think of the word, nationalism around his cause, and then also create tremendous fear among his constituents that, hey, if you were out of line, you weren't just going to get fired. He was going to put a bullet through your head. And this intense sense of nationalism, spreading. My question to you is, how different is it in the United States today? Are we any different than Nazi Germany was before the outbreak of World War II? And quite frankly, people, they don't see it at the surface, but if you really dig into it, you take a look at just the role of a police officer and how that's changed. It used to be you would hope that you could trust your police force, that they were actually there to help you. That you could actually go to a police officer and say, hey, I need some help. My home was breaking into, or my car was stolen, or this and that, or my wife's in labor. Can you, drive us to the hospital? We don't even have that environment anymore. I'm going to give you a specific example that I don't think I've ever aired on air before of racism, reverse racism that I've actually experienced. I've never talked about because I don't really think it's relevant a lot of the time, but I'm going to specifically get into it today because of what's happening with the George Zimmerman, Trayvon Martin story. I remember when I first came to Arizona, this was about maybe 10 plus years ago, I was pulled over by an African-American police officer who stopped me, asked me how fast I was going. I was, maybe going 10 miles per hour over the speed limit or something like that. Took me out of the car, physically out of the vehicle, very aggressive with me, and called me a honky. I want that to sink in. Called me a honky. Seriously, an African-American police officer called me, I was 10 years younger at the time, a honky. I couldn't believe it. That's not something I've ever really mentioned before. So I guess I'm not saying that racism doesn't exist in America anymore, but I also think that it's used and positioned regularly to achieve a political aim, like everything. This is the art of propaganda. That's the business that the media is in. That's the business that CNN and Fox News is in. Controlling you, indoctrinating you. Look at MTV, for example. MTV is pop culture. Massive viewership, influence, the youth generation, with the youth very much influencing everything to the clothes you wear, how you act, what's, trending, even through social media now. If you notice their shows, I know a lot of you don't watch TV, I don't really either, but a lot of these shows now, they very much have like this quick appeal, where it's very much a hyper moving, very social media feel to it now. These companies are extremely, extremely powerful, and it's why they have such a self-interest, and involvement with what's happening with technology today. So these are things that I just find, extremely interesting about our society, but also telling where we are. Same thing with the gay issue, which I know has been, the big story over the past few days with Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton. A lot of you know this because I slammed Hillary Clinton yesterday, and I slammed Bill Clinton, who I think is a lying psychopath. He may be charismatic and he gives great speeches, but he's a liar. He's a felon. He committed perjury on the stand regarding the Monica Lewinsky scandal. He should be in jail. That's just the bottom line. But here's a guy who passed DOMA, was a perpetrator and played a direct role in basically preventing gay people from equal rights, for achieving equality and these kinds of things, now jumping on the bandwagon to win votes, to petition or to position Billary 2016, so the next heir. I'm sure Chelsea, she's going to run for president too, and I don't think she's had a kid yet, but her kid will definitely be a president as well, and her kid, and we're just going to keep the kings and queens going, which, I don't think is going to happen. I think the people are going to demand a change. I think that honestly this system, there's no need for it anymore. The government, no need for it. People are like, oh, who's going to build your roads, Chris? Who's going to build your bridges? Who's going to take care of you? Well, why don't we just do it at a state level? Why don't we just do it at a local level? Why am I forced into Obamacare? Why do I have to pay taxes on wars overseas that I don't support? Give hard-earned dollars, Americans giving hard-earned dollars so Obama can invade Libya, or he can implement and institute a no-fly zone in Syria, drop a couple of drones, in these places of the world. Why we don't have to support these things. It's why the founding fathers set up states, so that there was some autonomy amongst the country itself. And they very much feared centralized power and a concentration of that, because they knew that it ultimately would always lead to tyranny. It's one of the reasons they armed us. It wasn't because, people say, oh, it was the archaic thing where you needed a gun, you hunted and these kinds of things, and, oh, there's a lot of history. No, they directly gave us the Second Amendment and the right to bear arms to protect ourselves from a tyrannical government, because they knew when they set this up. And it's only taken a few hundred years. That's the short blip that it took, and we have already reached tyranny. I don't think we're any different from the rise of Nazi Germany before the outbreak of World War II. They specifically gave us that right to protect ourselves from tyranny, from these people, from a concentration of power, which has a tendency, and history has shown us directly, leads to totalitarianism, leads to a police state. And it doesn't matter whether or not it's a physical police state or it's a digital one. And guess what? Guess what we're finding out? Guess what people like me have been talking about for years now? We now live in a virtual, digital police state. You are not in control anymore. You are being controlled. And, it was interesting, too. Steve Wozniak, co-founder of Apple, was talking about this the other day, just how he's very saddened by the fact, again, co-founder of Apple, and, him and Steve Jobs, working together for years. He's very saddened by the fact that something that they started, that they helped to innovate, that brought down the barriers of control and gave the little guy a chance, has now been completely engineered and flipped over on its head to create even more control and even more power. And created, again, this totalitarian environment that is extremely dangerous and is a direct threat to every freedom that every American should value in this country. So how do we change these things? Because, we do have the power. People vote with their dollars every day. We vote by the websites we're surfing, the companies that we endorse, the people we do business with, the people we hang out with. You know, there's an old saying, you are your friends. You know, you are who your friends are. You know, typically the people that you hang out with are kind of like yourself. So, you know, your mom probably told you growing up, look, you know, if you hang out with those bad kids, you'll be a bad kid too. If you hang out with good kids, you're typically a good kid. It's the same thing in life. But it's got to the point, do we have a choice? You know, we see these antitrust suits. Microsoft was a very good, case study on this not too long ago, where, you know, they're emblazoned in an antitrust suit because they almost have too much power. You know, they actually achieve what every business is trying to achieve. They're trying to dominate their competition, which is exactly what they did. But now we have a similar environment among a few technology giants that I would argue have a monopoly over our lives. Again, as much as I love YouTube, and I think that it's this great thing, and wow, look at what it's done to get the truth out and get information out and create a two-way communication stream where I can actually have a conversation with you, and the little guy has, you know, a say. That's amazing. It is still very scary to me that we've got, you know, a single company that controls, you know, 80% of video traffic on the internet. So what we have to realize is there's very much a hive mentality to all this, where the hive is now, you know, it's deeply connected to certain companies, but that can change. You know, we saw this with MySpace, for example, which, you know, rocked the internet for a few years, and then all of a sudden it dies, and it no longer exists. So to me, the hive is beginning to get a little bit smarter. You know, I know that that's the masses and the mass mentality. We can't really count on, you know, that well. But imagine if this continues to catch fire. You know, it really takes only about 10%, of a specific group to change things. And we talk about this in terms of revolution. You know, they've done studies on this where, you know, if 10% of the people actually kind of come to agreement on something, they can actually affect legitimate change. You know, it wasn't every single American. You know, it wasn't 100% of the American people that were necessarily fighting the American Revolutionary War, fighting for independence. You know, there was, you know, patriot groups and, you know, people out in the bushes and farmers getting together, but it was really just a percentage of the society at the time that actually waited off, the redcoats, and, you know, we were able to, you know, establish our independence. So do we need the full buzzing hive to really, you know, change things? Not necessarily. It'd be great to have them, but we need to realize how much power that collective has. And I think that we're starting to see it. We're starting to grasp it a little bit. And, of course, big corporations, the multi-billion-dollar industries, and companies within the media and government itself are doing everything they can to put a lid on that. And to control that. We need to make sure that doesn't happen. You know, we need to make sure that there's some kind of choice. I mean, think about when you sign up, for example, for a specific account online. You've got to go through their terms of service agreement. There's all those pages nobody ever reads. Do you have a choice? You have a choice whether or not to use the service, but what if that service has a monopoly on your life, for example? I mean, can you really exist without Google? Are you going to, let's just say, for example, just boycott Google? You can, but that would mean you can never use it to search anything, to find information. Maybe you need, you know, driving directions. You can't use any of their services. You can't do any of these things. So, you know, we need to police the police. We need to police our own government. It's not that these companies are necessarily or inherently bad. I really don't think that they are, but I know for a fact that they're being pressured heavily by the government. And, you know, when big bad government comes over and says, you know, look, hey, Zuckerberg, we want this from you. Hopefully they say no, but there's no guarantees that they're going to do that, especially when they're under enormous pressure. You know, so it's these are incredible topics that I think honestly needs to be put out into the public dialogue. It needs to be put out into the narrative. You know, we're still trying to figure out how to get to your comments here, which I think we can actually see. So let me go check this out or look for a link on how to pull this up. See if I can do that. I'm going to go to your comments here in just a second, so bear with me. There should be a direct link that I can just kind of embed. Let's see here. So I definitely want to go to your comments today. I want to hear from you guys. So while I'm doing this, think about what you guys want to ask, comment, or talk about.
YouTube/live. There you go. Third box.
Okay, I see us here. We're actually the third box on the home page. Okay, I can see the comments. Okay, GoBoy102 says, Bing. Deanie Muter says, and by doing that, you would only create a bigger government. Well, maybe expand upon that. I'm not sure I understand that. So maybe ask a follow-up question to that. Since he says divide, that's why we are at in the world joined. We would be unbeatable. Well, that is true. If again, the collective is more powerful than a concentration, of power, at the highest levels in law of the land. Tony says, I'm fighting as much as I have in me. Well, Tony, keep fighting, brother. Never give up. Brian says, forced to join the army or jailed if you don't. That's kind of an interesting question. I've talked about this a little bit before. If you live in Israel, it's mandatory that the youth actually, dedicate a few years to some basic training. Do you think that would be a good thing here in the United States? I actually think it would be. I think that, we've got a generation that is pretty darn incapable of a lot of things. And even technologically speaking, this is changing the synapses in our brain to the point where, people can't even do 2 + 2 anymore. It's like, hey, what's 2 + 2? And they go straight to their phone. It's like, dude, you got a brain. Use it. Think. So I'd be curious to hear what you guys think about that. So 80s rock guitar says, your honky story brought to surface all the tards currently viewing. Shows that many viewers just can't be reached no matter what. Ignorance and insensitivity will always remain in this kind. I think it's how you handle things, too. I mean, I didn't let that comment ruin my life or anything. I was obviously a little bit angry about it, and it was strange, for that to happen. But, these things can be blown out of proportion. The great and powerful was from Jonathan Bognaski. Jim's Iggy says Jesus will return before Hillary becomes president of the United States. I would be a redneck. Laughing out loud. Goat boy. Me too. So great to have everybody in the live chat today. Looks like we've got a few hundred people, and we'll of course get an archive version. I was getting accused the other day. They're like, hey, Chris, this isn't live. Know the difference between your live shows. Well, this is live. It's June 28th, 2013. And, great to be on the air. Go back here, check out, see if I can find any more comments. It says, we do need regular people in office instead of these rich out-of-touch jerks. Couldn't agree with that more. Cynthia Allen says, vote for Bob. So I encourage you to check Bob out. Throw him a little love. Tell him Christopher Green of AMTV sent you his way. I'm not sure if he's already positioned or kind of launched his platform, but he does say that that's coming based on the last video I watched. I think it's fantastic. I think it'd be fantastic to start getting some regular people involved in politics. I certainly would have my support. So I'd like to take a closer look at his platform because I haven't necessarily vetted that yet, so please study yourself. I'm not necessarily personally endorsing drinking with Bob, but I do think it is pretty cool what he's doing. I think we're going to start seeing a lot more of this, and there's a lot of good to be done. And I think we're seeing a lot of just average, normal, real people like myself, starting to effect impactful change in government, And I think that this can have a profound impact, not just in America, but really all around the world. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today. Of course, we'll be back live in studio on Monday, working really hard to get the technology set up to continue to grow our program and our show. Please continue to support us. We really need your help. Visit us at amtvmedia.com. Make sure to head over to our Facebook page. Have a couple awesome posts there that you won't see on our website. Like us. Get it out to your friends and family. As always, I'm Christopher Green, hard-hitting and in your face. Peace.